Hi everybody, you are watching a video on a research article presentation guideline. There are three parts that I want to share. First, what to do in this meeting, next, how to present, and the last, an example of a research article presentation. Let's go to the first part, what to do in this meeting. So you have to create a video. You can use a video conferencing tool, for example, Zoom, and do not forget to record your presentation. And next, you have to upload your video to YouTube with the file name Research Article Presentation 8A Article 1. And you have to submit your video link. Copy the link of your video from your YouTube and then submit it to Scalsa. Second, I will tell you how to present a research article. First, greeting or opening. For example, good morning or good afternoon. Next, introducing your group members. For example, let me introduce my group members. My name is Ling as the first speaker, Terry as the second speaker, and Jacob as the third speaker. Next, stating your purpose. For example, we would like to present a research article entitled The Impact of COVID-19. And the last is closing or thanking. For example, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can contact us. Now, I will give you an example of a research article presentation. Hello, good morning. My name is Chi. Today, I'm going to present a research article entitled Assessment of Knowledge, Attitude, and Practice of Iranian Nurses Towards Toothbrush Maintenance and Use. It's written by Muhammad Nazarian Pirdosti, Mariam Janatul Makan, Bahari Andayeskar, and Ali Reza Katoni. Well, everyone, there are 5 parts in my presentation: introduction, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. Now, let's go to the first, introduction. Oral health is the most important practice, and nurses were aware of it. Well, it's supported by the previous research conducted in Europe and the United States, Malaysia, India, Iran, Norway, Nigeria, and Australia. In Europe and the United States, oral health is the most important practices. In Malaysia, nurses had a good attitude about oral health. And in India, nurses had a positive attitude about oral health. But in Iran, nurses had poor oral care practice. And in Norway, oral health is an important issue. In Nigeria, nurses had an inadequate knowledge. And in Australia, nurses were aware of the importance of the oral health practice. So it reveals that nurses also had a good attitude about oral health. However, some nurses had poor oral care practice and an inadequate knowledge. This research was conducted for considering the educational role of nurses in promoting oral health and the lack of information about knowledge, attitude, and practice regarding toothbrush maintenance and use. This research has limitations. A self-report method that could affect the accuracy of the result. And the second point is the cross-sectional nature. In this case, the researchers did not determine the causal relationships between demographic and knowledge, attitude, and practice variables. The researchers used different tools. Using different tools can limit the accurate comparison of the study results. Now let's move to the research questions. There are 3 questions. The first is, what is the nurse's level of knowledge about toothbrush maintenance and use? And the next, what is the nurse's attitude and practice regarding toothbrush maintenance and use? And the last, what is the relationship between nurse's knowledge, attitude, and practice in toothbrush maintenance and use and their demographic variables? And based on the research questions, the researchers had 3 purposes. The first, to know the nurse's level of knowledge about toothbrush maintenance and use. The second, to know the nurse's attitude and practice regarding toothbrush maintenance and use. And the third, to know the relationship between nurse's knowledge, attitude, and practice in toothbrush maintenance and use and their demographic variables. Next, methods. The participants were nurses working in hospitals affiliated to Carmenza University of Medical Sciences. The population was 2,042 and the sample size was estimated to be 325 using Cochrane's formula. This study was conducted in 7 hospitals, and the researchers started the research in March to May 2019. The type of the study was descriptive analytical cross-sectional study. The type of the study was descriptive analytical cross-sectional study, and the technique used were qualitative and quantitative content validity method. And the instruments were a personal information form and a questionnaire on nurses' knowledge, attitude, and practice in toothbrush maintenance and use. The personal information form, including gender, age, level of education, marital status, and work experience. And the questionnaire was used to assess the nurse's knowledge, attitude, and practice in toothbrush maintenance and use. The next is data collection. The researchers proposed the project and received the approval of the university and attended the nurse's place of work according to the work schedule, and explained the objectives of the study to the nurses, and if they're willing to participate, the questionnaires were distributed, and the nurses were given enough time to complete the questionnaires to ensure the validity of the data. The next is data analysis. In this research, SPSS 16 software using descriptive and inferential statistics was applied to analyze the data.
Mean, standard deviation, median, and simple and relative frequency distributions were used for the descriptive statistics.
And for inferential statistics, using Mann-Whitney U, that is for examining the relationship between knowledge, attitude, and practice variables and gender and education level variables. Kolmogorov-Smirnov was used to evaluate the normality of the distribution of knowledge, attitude, and practice variables, while Kruskal-Wallis was used to examine the relationship between knowledge, attitude, and practice variables and age and work experience variables. Now let's move to the results. Based on the table, we can see that most of the participants were female. It's about 197 and had a bachelor's degree, 299, and in the age range of 22 to 32, it's about 193, and had 1 to 9 years of work experience. And based on figure 1, the mean score of nurses' knowledge about toothbrush maintenance and use was 59.2 out of 100. And the mean scores of nurses' attitude and practice were 64.2 and 51.4 out of 100. And based on these tables, we can see that there was no significant relationship between the mean scores of nurses' knowledge, attitude, and practice variables and gender, education, age, and work experience. Now let's move to the discussion. Participants had a moderate level of knowledge and practice and an unfavorable attitude about the maintenance and use of toothbrushes. Studies conducted by Ibrahim et al., Srinivasan et al. 90% Sundanese nurses had good knowledge regarding oral health. Studies conducted by Ahmed et al. 70% of Indian nurses had poor knowledge about oral health. And studies conducted on the Indian and Iranian nurses, it shows poor practices. And Indian and Australian nurses had good attitude. And the differences in the demographic characteristics of the participants and the variety of data collection tools make it difficult to compare the results. And the next, the finding of the previous study is consistent with the previous studies. It shows no significant relationship between age and knowledge, attitude, and practice. However, Lin et al. In their research, it shows significant relationship between nurses' age and oral care practice. Next, the previous studies and the present study had no significant relationship between gender, knowledge, practice, and attitude. And however, Bezer et al. In their research, it shows significant relationship between gender and nurses' practice. While having sufficient knowledge and practice about oral health, including toothbrush maintenance and use, should be considered by both sexes. And the next, it also had the same result, that is, in the previous studies and the present study, showing no significant relationship between the level of education and nurses' knowledge, practice, and attitude. And in some studies, it shows that it had significant relationship. And in this case, nurses should have a good attitude and sufficient knowledge and practice about oral health, including toothbrush maintenance and use. And the next, the previous studies and the present study also had the same result, that is, no significant relationship between work experience and the variables. And here, nurses are expected to have sufficient knowledge and practice and a good attitude towards the principles of maintenance and use of toothbrushes. Now we've come to the conclusion. The most important finding is that nurses should have moderate knowledge, attitude, and practice toward toothbrush maintenance and use. And for the implication, nurses should evaluate the factors related to nurses' knowledge, attitude, and practice regarding oral health and the effect of intervention measures on the variables. There are some strengths and weaknesses of the study. The strengths are the research was able to describe the variables like gender, education, age, work experience, knowledge, attitude, and practice in toothbrush maintenance and use. And it's also able to generalize the findings by using sample. While the weaknesses are it's not able to determine the causal relationship between demographic and knowledge, attitude, and practice variables. And it has no accurate comparison of the result. And of course, it's time consuming because the researchers had to meet nurses in 7 hospitals and wait for them to complete the questionnaires. And the recommendations are holding training courses on the principles of oral hygiene for the nurses and pay attention to the issue of oral health, emphasizing on the maintenance and use of toothbrushes. Well, I guess that's all for the presentation. Thank you so much. Well, that's an example of a research article presentation. And it's the end of my slide. Thank you so much and good luck for your presentation.